Hi guys, you're listening to Ebird Online, and here's my first review for 90 Day Fiance, Season 7, Episode 3, What Am I Worth to You? And on this review, I'm going to be talking about Robert and Anny, and Anna and Marsul. I'm going to cover Anna and Marsul very quickly, because we have an awful lot to cover with Robert and Anny. I've got some very choice words for Robert, but unfortunately most of them are not publishable. Guys, I'm closing in on 15,000 subscribers, so please don't forget to click that red button if you haven't done so as yet. Thank you so much to all of you guys who are supporting me already and who have already subscribed. It is very much appreciated. So because some of these couples are a little bit dry this season, I'm going to make sure my reviews really focus on the people who have decent storylines and have lots for us to talk about, like Robert and Anny. But first up, we're going to have a quick look at Anna and Marsul. So we catch up with Anna and Marsul this week, pretty much where we left them last week, and they're tackling the problem about Mursel not wanting his family to know about Anna's kids. Anna takes Mursel to the park, and Anna asks, "Why do you think I was crying at dinner last night?" Mursel correctly ascertained that it was because they were losing each other. Well, yes and no, Mursel. You actually can't lose what you never had. But I digress. Mursel said he can't tell his family about Anna's kids because he's worried about losing his family and worried about shaming his family. And he continues he'll be very upset if his family find out. And then Anna asks him when he's going to tell his parents. This little simpleton tells them, "I'm going to tell them in 10 years' time." And Anna says, "What happens if they find out before? Will you still stay in America?" And Mursel says he doesn't know if he'll stay. He'd have to consider it. And this obvious problem was bound to rear its ugly head, and this shows just how stupid Mursel is. He claims that he feels very guilty about this problem, but not guilty enough not to put these children through it. And then he says quite prophetically, "This is our destiny," which the E-Bird thinks is Mursel's way of saying, it is what it is. Mursel, no, it isn't what it is. You can either be a man and tell your parents, "This is what I'm doing, I love this person, I'm going to stay in America," but what you can't do is bury your head in the sand. So what does Anna decide to do? Here's what I think she should do. Give Mursel an ultimatum to say, either you tell your parents within, 3 months, or we don't get married and you go home to Turkey. I'm not going to have my boys in this situation. Is that what she does? No, of course it's not, because she's not the brightest tool in the box either. She decides to force the issue with Mursel with her boys. So they all sit in the back garden and Gino, her eldest, says, "Mursel, when are we going to Turkey?" Mursel says, "In 3 years' time." And Gino asks why. And then he goes on to say, "I know that my brothers and I are a secret and I want an explanation as to why." And Mursel tells him, "My family doesn't know you are." And he goes on to say, "If they found out about you, they wouldn't talk to me. I want you to be understanding about this." Gino asks, "Will you be expelled from your family if you do?" And Mursel's one-word answer was yes. And at this point, I really love the kids' response because they basically have more intelligence in their little fingers than Mursel has in the whole of his brain. And they say, well, that's his fault. He should have thought about the consequences of this whole issue before meeting the mum, before deciding to move to America, before completely uprooting his life. And then the youngest one pipes up as well. And he says, "You only care about our mum." And to be quite honest, I think he's right, because Mursel then pipes up again that Turkey is the most amazing place on earth and that he completely loves Turkey. And Andalusia, where he's from, is the most beautiful place on earth. How would you know, Mursel? You've barely been anywhere else. And he hopes one day they can all go back and live there. And for the meantime, because there are a few problems, they're going to live in the US. Mursel, both you and Anna are dimwits. You haven't thought any of this relationship through, and I usually wouldn't be that concerned. But you haven't considered these 3 children who have already had somewhat of a tumultuous upbringing. And instead of being a steady hand and offering a great father figure, you offer them idiot uncle. But I think the most person that's at fault here, unfortunately, is Anna. She has kids, so she knows what they've been through and she knows how kids worry about things. So although Anna's saying, "Don't worry kids, even if Mursel tries to make me choose between him and you, I would always pick you," the fact that you've even got him over here to listen to this horse crap tells the boys that you make bad decisions. And it's still always going to be unsettling if you think someone's trying to drag your mum away from them and drag her all the way to Turkey and leave them here. You should never ever think about making your kids feel so unwanted and such like second-class citizens. Mursel, if Turkey was so great, why didn't you just stay there? And if Turkey's so wonderful, why'd you get young, fit waiters marrying old grannies? just to get the hell out. I'm not going to say too much more on these two, other than that they're both a disgrace. Okay, so let me know what you think about Anna and Mursel. Do you think Anna's out of order to put her kids through this? And do you think these guys can make it? I'm really doubting it at this point, and we're one day in. Anyway, on to what you've all been waiting for. I bring you Robert and Anny. So we find them at Robert's apartment, and Anny gleefully informs us that she and Robert had sex in the living room last night, and it would seem now she's after payment. And she informs Robert that her sister sold all her clothes, and just like Dick Whittington, she has only the clothes on her back. She sold them to look after her father, allegedly, but judging by her 1990s R&B video attire from the airport last week, Dad is only going to be fed until Wednesday. After that, he's completely screwed. And we see them at the apartment, and Bryson's just going off to school, and Anny does seem to have bonded with him, and they hugged and kissed before he went, and Bryson does seem really happy to have her around. The major worry that I have is that if she is just here for the short term, and she has to leave Bryson, thereby rejecting him again, it will be extremely detrimental for Bryson. But I suppose I never thought of it this way. Maybe even if they split up, she'll maintain the relationship with Bryson, which it seems more than his mother's bothered to do. But fear not, Anny. Robert tells you he's going to take you shopping. Unfortunately, Robert is one of life's cheapskates. So on the way shopping, Anny was really excited, and when they go in, Anny discovers it's a second-hand shop. And as you can imagine, she was very, very unhappy. She was walking around, looking at the clothes, screwing up her nose, and Robert was just picking up anything and trying to say, this is nice, without even considering what Anny looks like or what Anny wears. Anny said these are disgusting rags, and she tells us that when she went to America, she imagined herself in Versace and Chanel, and she was just explaining to Robert just how crap it all was when the assistant came over. And Anny said, I don't like any of these clothes, we haven't managed to find anything. And I think although it was right that Anny wasn't particularly pleased, because it seems as if Robert's cutting corners at every point, there was no need whatsoever to be as rude as she was to the shop assistant. But Robert's attitude left a lot to be desired. So we catch up with them a little bit later, and they're in the car and they're on the way to a restaurant. And Robert tells Anny, you really hurt me. The way that you're acting earlier, I thought was disgusting, and you were acting like you were all that when I took you to the thrift store. Robert, you were the one that told us just last week that this girl is fire, this girl is the bomb, this girl is beautiful, this girl is stunning. She is all that, according to you. If she wasn't all that, you shouldn't have brought her from her country to come and live with you. Now I know quite a few people that shop at thrift stores, and they like getting 70s or 80s vintage clothing, but as far as I'm concerned, something like that is your own decision. It's not something that should be forced upon you, and then when you don't want to wear the second-hand clothes, you're being told that you're spoiled and that you're a brat and that you think you're better than you are. And I would say it's quite like giving a second-hand present. If somebody gives you a present that you know they've already worn or they've already used and they didn't want anymore, and then they try and give it to you, you know very well that you're playing second fiddle and that you're not their main priority. And this for their relationship I think is a great worry, because they still should be in their honeymoon period at the moment, but it seems as if they're having lots of arguments. And it tells us that Robert promised to take her shopping, and I find, Robert, that you did. You knew that Anny was poor, and you knew that Anny needed money, and you knew that you'd only met her for 8 hours and she still agreed to marry you. So that should give you a clear indication that when you're bringing her to the US, it's not just all for love. And it would seem that your friend Jose was correct all along. But Robert seems somewhat perplexed by all of this, and he said when we were talking on the phone, we never ever argued. No, Robert, you wouldn't have done, because Anny was busy lapping up all your lies. You promised to buy her an iPhone, and then you reneged on it. You also promised to buy her new clothes. You haven't done that either. It's not that you're duty bound to do these things, but just don't promise them, and don't drag someone to another country on false promises and lies. And so next time we catch up with them, they're in the car and they're on the way to go to dinner. So they sit down in the restaurant and they start to read the menu, and Annie's looking at all the seafood, and she says to Robert, what kind of food are we going to have at our wedding? I would love to have a seafood menu at the wedding. And Robert looked at her as if she'd just defecated on a plate and said, hell no. And he went on to say, we won't be doing that. We'll be having some sort of cheap buffet. I'm not having everybody eating and drinking off of me. No way. What do you think I am? No way. And then he asked her, what kind of wedding do you want? And Annie said, I'd like a ceremony and then a wedding. In fact, I'd love to get married on Miami Beach. And Robert said, I just want a ceremony. I don't want any actual wedding, and I just want a couple of people at the ceremony. What do you think I am? Made of money. We'll go to the courthouse and that's it. And this really surprises me, because Robert's saying he doesn't want everyone eating and drinking off of him. But Robert, this is for your family and your friends. They're not eating and drinking off of you. They've come to witness your love, and they've come to witness your big day. I'm sure you can come to some sort sort of reasonable agreement as to how many guests you have and as to what kind of establishment you'll have it in and how much you're likely to spend. But to say to Anny, after she's moved country, nope, there'll be no wedding, we're just popping off to the courthouse, without discussing that with her first, is beyond the pale, and you know it. And why do you know it? Because you then go on to try and gaslight her. And Robert said, I care more about you than having a buku wedding. It's nice that he can speak French. Next, Robert, you can try English. And he continued, my main goal is to enjoy my time with you, to keep you here in my life. And instead of having this Hollywood wedding on Miami Beach saying, look at me, that's not what I want. And honestly, guys, one thing that really gets my goat is when guys try and gaslight. She's not saying she wants a Hollywood wedding. And she's not saying, look at me. And you're purposefully trying to exaggerate as a sort of cover-up for your preposterous level of cheapness. And then he gets really angry. He says, forget about Miami. What the F is it with you and Miami? You want to move there or something? Well, if you do, move there by yourself. And he spat the words at her, and it was quite venomous. And Anny said, don't talk to me like that, otherwise you'll find yourself wearing my drink. And she threatens to swill him. And all of this is quite surprising to me, because for whatever reason, I thought that he actually lived in Miami. I thought he was from Brooklyn and he'd moved to Miami, but I'm guessing from this that he actually hasn't. But just a word of wise to Americans, if you're in the state of Florida, when a lot of people come from overseas, we just think automatically Miami. We think of Nikki Beach, we think of Liv, we think of all the great clubs. And so it's not surprising that Miami was at the forefront of her mind. So after all of this, the food comes and Anny refuses to eat her food. And Robert said, oh my God, you're so childish, you're so pathetic. Are you going to storm out after every little argument? And Anny says, I want you to apologise for the way you spoke to me, which I think is the very least that he could have done. And he said, okay, I'ma apologise. And then he said, I'm sorry that you're inconsiderate, and I'm sorry that you are a crybaby. And the gaslighting continues. So they drive home, and on the way, again Robert says, you've peed me off. You don't appreciate nothing. And by that I assume he means you don't appreciate anything. And he said, for everything I do for you, it's never good enough. Robert, I'm yet to see anything that you've done for Anny whatsoever. Anything at all. When you brought Anny to Florida, you didn't tell her that one, you would all have to sleep in one bed together because you failed to buy a bed for your son. You failed to tell her that 2, if I do buy you any clothes, I'll buy second-hand ones for you because that's what I think you're worth. Number 3, he failed to tell her that he didn't want to have a proper wedding, he just wanted a simple ceremony with a couple of people there. And number 4, he didn't tell her that he was an unbelievable and disgusting cheapskate who believed himself to be more generous than Bill Gates, and he seems to feel as if Anny should be grateful. And Anny tells the VT that she's worried about Robert because maybe he's a liar. And that's the understatement of the century. But of course it's night time, and Robert wants what Robert wants. So he stops scowling and gaslighting long enough to go and grab the lingerie that he bought from the shop for her from last week. And it's very unsurprising to me that the only thing that he's bought from somewhere nice is something from which he personally can benefit, lingerie. He presents it to her and Anny smiles and puts it on. And he says, we've got a babysitter for Bryson, let's make the most of it. Anny puts on the lingerie and she closes the door and says, I'm going to give you everything you want. Anny, no you're not. Robert wants a girlfriend for free. It's never going to happen. And I'll leave the rest to your imagination. Or on the other hand, you can wait until next week because Anny, it seems, likes to give a little bit too much information. And Robert tells us he has red flags about Anny due to money. Robert, I have black flags for you, and they're at half-mast because as far as I'm concerned, your relationship is dead. So guys, let me know what you think about this couple. Here's my take on it. I do believe that he said he'd buy her an iPhone because she's never shut up about that. I also believe that he said he was going to buy her new clothes. And he knows very well that second-hand clothes are not the one for 2 reasons. Firstly, he didn't tell her it was a thrift store before he went. That's because he knew she wouldn't like it. And secondly, when she turned her nose up at the thrift store, he said, you think you're all that. So in other words, the higher up or the better the woman, the less likely they are to like a thrift store. And the lower down a woman, the more likely they are. Not that I necessarily believe that's true, but that's what you're saying, Robert. So you're trying to pull Anny down to your level and say, don't act like you're all that, and you should be grateful for anything I do for you. So I think he promised her lots of things, and it's not so much that he's changed his mind. He was never ever in a position to give her any of these things in the first instance. And when he's talking to Anna on the VT, he said, oh, so it's all on me? So I have to do everything? You don't have to do anything? She's done something already, Robert. She's left her dad, she's left her siblings, and she's left her country. She's moved halfway across the world to hear your bad language, terrible English, and broken promises. Annie's English is actually better than yours. And you try to gaslight Annie by insinuating she wants some sort of celebrity Hollywood wedding. But let's look at what you want. You want a relationship with someone who's quite fit. And let's not forget you called her smoking hot. You want someone to be a mother figure and to look after Bryson. And you're expecting her to build a whole brand new life away from her family and friends. And you expected her to give you her love and to be a great partner for you. And you also expected a great and healthy sex life. And what do you think you had to give her in return? Of course, Robert, all of this costs money. And in order to lure her over here, you promised her the earth, and when she got here, you presented her with topsoil. You knew that Annie was a money grabber. We all knew from the moment we clapped eyes on her. She talked about money and clothes, but you went along with it because you wanted to trick her over to Florida in the hope that you could quickly get married and have an absolutely free built-in nanny stroke escort stroke life partner. And even if you didn't know that all of that costs money, your friend Jose told you, and now you expect us all to believe that this money issue is a red flag and you just want to paint her as a gold digger. Robert, with your background and attitude, you knew very well it would be difficult to get someone of Annie's standard in the US, and so you sought to get somebody from the DR in the hope she'd be grateful. But little did you know, Robert, you're so trifling that you're going to have to go a lot further than the DR to find someone that's grateful for you. So let me know in comments what you guys think. Do you think Robert's out of order, or do you go along with what he says? Do you think that Annie expects far too much? Can you see these guys getting married? And what do you think of the way that Robert speaks to Annie? Please let me know. And also, if you haven't as yet, please just press that red button. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel for regular videos, and don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Ebird99. I'll be back tomorrow with part 2. Thank you so much for listening. It's Ebird Online. Ciao for now.